Hey, it's Chronologically Gaming, the only channel that's perpetually retro because we're playing every video game in order of release. Welcome to the Backlog, where we're checking out all the video games that we missed on the previous entries of the channel, which means we went all the way back to the beginning and we're playing every single game we missed so that no game is left behind before we get to 1983. Let's see where we left off. It's still 1973, and we were in the arcade playing Space Race. Let's see what our next game is. Our next game still takes us to the arcades. Now it is July. At some time in July 1973, this is Elepong, the 34th video game we've seen so far on the show. Elepong? Elephant Pong? Elegant Pong? I don't know what they were thinking with this one. All we have is some artwork for Elepong. This is the 10th arcade game we've seen so far, and it is the very first video game that is by Taito. Taito! Here they are, the very first one, and it is a ripoff of Pong. You can see it features solid-state electronic components for long life and rugged usage. Is anyone playing Elepong right now? Did it last that long? I guess we'll find out. It has a large 20-inch TV screen, which is huge. It is electronically simulating ping pong game visually displayed on a TV screen. And that's pretty much kind of what Pong was going for originally. You know, ping pong, the most exciting and profitable new video game ever. So this is very first video game that Taito's ever done, and it's following the artwork that we've seen with advertisement flyers later. This is how they began. Look at that. It even has a slight, maybe a little bit anime aesthetic to this advertisement flyer. But then right over here by my head is the arcade cabinet. It has equipped with paddles, just like we saw with the other. Oh, actually, no. Those don't look like paddles when you get closer to the system. It is essentially just Pong. And there's the back of the advertisement flyer that has not been translated, all in Japanese, because this is the second video game that we've seen in Japan so far. There's another example of the arcade cabinet. So this is by Tomohiro Nishikado, the very first video game that Tomohiro has done, and he will go on to do Space Invaders. This is the very first video game that I know of that he did, and it's essentially Pong. It's a ball and paddle style game, the 11th ball and paddle video game we've seen so far, and instead of paddles, it's using a rotary joystick, which every other paddle or Pong style game has been using, you know, the dials that you twist and turn. This one still twists and turn, but not necessarily the same way you're thinking when you think of like Atari 2600 paddles. But forget I said that because there's no such thing as Atari 2600 right now. This is also the 33rd game we played that is using discrete logic, DTL or TTL, which means no microprocessor inside this one, and it is the 10th variant of Pong that we've seen so far. Elepong is once again another video game we cannot play. If it plays exactly like Pong, I mean, two people play together or against one another, I'm sure we could figure out how it works. But since on the show, if we don't play it ourselves, we're going to rate it 0 and not rate Elepong. All right, let's keep pressing forward and seeing every single video game still in 1973. Our very next video game still takes us to Japan in the arcade. This is Pong-Tron. It is released at some time in July 1973. The advertisement flyer for Pong-Tron. Now, the very first video game that was done by Atari, Nolan Bushnell and Ted Dabney. I believe when I said in the previous episode, Fred Dabney, it's not. It's Nolan Bushnell and Ted Dabney were the founders of Atari. Their first arcade cabinet, Computer Space, was being advertised by a woman, and this one in Sega in Japan said, okay, well, let's get two women. It'll help sell the game. But once again, I don't see the appeal. It doesn't seem like these are the kind of women that would be selling cars, so why would you have them sell the arcade cabinet? It looks like two of my great aunts selling Pong-Tron. So this is our 35th video game we've seen so far on Chronologically Gaming, the 11th video game in the arcade, and this is the very first video game by Sega. Video game by Sega. Prior to Pong-Tron's release, Sega has built successes through electromechanical, arcade games, pinball tables, slot machines, jukeboxes. They are not shy of the arcade. They've already been pumping lots of stuff out. This is the very first video game by Sega. And it is the 12th video game that we've seen that's a ball and paddle style game, which means it's the 11th variant of Pong. More Pong. Pong is king right now. Flip over the advertising flyer, they just have some legal mumbo jumbo. But here's the arcade cabinet for Pong-Tron. This one is the 29th video game we've seen so far that uses paddles, and it is the 34th video game that is discrete logic. No microprocessor inside, so a lot of these video games that we're seeing in the beginning, you have to have simulators to play yourself. Or maybe you go to an arcade now and play it. Very rare to find these style games. Okay, so this is another part of the advertisement flyer. See, they're trying to, again, appeal to ping pong or a sport, because that's obviously the name Pong comes from. And there's the other side of the advertisement flyer. And so it's showing the way that you play the game. How do you play this game? Well, you turn these knobs and these paddles move up and down. It's just very quaint having people explain what Pong is. But here it is, Sega's Pong-Tron, the very first video game by Sega and the third video game that we've seen so far in Japan. All right, so another video game we can't play, so we're going to have to give it no rating. We're just breezing through all these games from the 70s. They are very simplistic video games, but we are covering, at least showcasing, every single video game. All right, after that, what's our next game? All right, we're going back to North America. This is Tennis Tourney, released at some time in July 1973. So we're still in the summer of 1973. Let's check out Tennis Tourney. Here's the advertisement flyer, and I think this is all we have. Yes, this is all I can find about this game. The 36th video game we've seen so far, the 12th video game that we've seen that's released in the arcade, and the second video game by Allied Leisure Industries. The other one being Paddle Battle, which was the first time anyone copied Pong, and so this is another style game that's like that. This is the 13th ball and paddle video game and the 12th variant of Pong that we've seen so far. It's also the second time we've seen a video game that's using the theme of tennis. Now, obviously, Pong can be using the theme of ping pong or tennis, but I mean that the advertisement is advertising tennis. The only other game we saw was the one for the Magnavox Odyssey. That one, even though you weren't really playing tennis, it was still bouncing, a ball back and forth, but they called it tennis, like this one. This is the 30th video game we've seen that is using paddles to twist, but look over at the arcade cabinet. First of all, it's 2 players for 25 cents, 4 players for 50 cents. In the summer of 1973, that is highway robbery. That is so expensive. You have both front and back court play. This is ridiculous. And this is the very first time we've seen a 4-player video game. But since release dates are a little bit spotty, I really don't want to call this the very first 4-player video game. It's possible that this one is the very first one, and obviously they're copying what Atari has already put out. So this one was another video game that was involved in a lawsuit from Atari. Yet another one. It's our 35th video game that uses discrete logic. Still no microprocessor inside this one. And it possibly could be the very first video game that had team play. You and 2 people against 2 people can be competing against. You each have your own paddle to play. It's our 32nd video game that we've seen from North America so far. So this one's big. I could call this the very first 4-player and team game, but I'll just leave it to whoever sets these release dates that I find in my research. Because I have another game coming up that I want to call the first 4-player and the first team video game. But this is all I have for Tennis Tourney. It's still another variant of Pong. And yet another game we have to say we cannot rate this one. I wanted rating to be a staple of this show, Chronologically Gaming, but since these games we can't play ourselves, we just have to keep them so far as being able to not rate. It's a not rated rating. All right, after that, let's see what our next game is. All right, still hanging out in North America for video game releases. This is, again, released in July, at some time in July 1973, and it's TV Ping Pong. Another clone. If you look over on the left side, that is some gameplay of this game, TV Ping Pong, our 37th video game that we've seen so far on Chronologically Gaming, the 13th video game released in the arcade, and the very first video game by Ammutronics. We're going to see a lot of companies that just pop out in this early time of video games, and we'll never see them again. I think we might see Ammutronics, but there's a lot of companies. This is our 14th video game that's a ball and paddle style arcade game, and the third video game that is the theme of ping pong, which you could argue Pong was, but it didn't actually advertise this is a game like ping pong. This one's actually trying to say we're playing ping pong, or at least the sport of ping pong. This is the 31st video game that we played that incorporates paddles for control, and it's the 36th video game that is using discrete logic, DTL and TTL. So over the left side, you can see we have some gameplay footage, at least that I could find on the web, but it's still Pong. It's the 13th variant of Pong and the 33rd video game that we've seen from North America. So let's see what the other artwork we have for TV Ping Pong. Exciting where it counts in the cash box. So much Pong. Pong is so big. Competitive two-player action, reliable solid-state mechanism, appeals for all players. So it's nothing flashy, nothing fancy. It might actually be the same arcade board as Pong, and they ripped it off. It wouldn't surprise me because some people did that. It's already happened. But I'm not aware of any lawsuits for this version of or this company doing TV Ping Pong. Yeah, you can see the arcade cabinet still has the paddle controls. Very, very simple, easy display. It's boasting the wood grain panel for the arcade cabinet. Yeah, there it is. But it's more Pong. Lots of Pong. Another video game we cannot rate. We got to give it not a rating because we couldn't play it ourselves. It's just Pong, though. All right, let's see what our next game is. Oh, there we go. This is another big one. So this is September 15th, 1973, and we're going to see what Pong Doubles is all about. This is one we've already showcased here on Chronologically Gaming, so we'll be really quick. This is the 38th video game we've seen so far, the 14th video game that's been in the arcades, and the 3rd video game by Atari and Alan Alcorn. Right now, Alan, go Alan, he is Atari. They should have called him Atari Alcorn, because every game so far that Atari has done that's been hits is done by Alan Alcorn. Let's take a look at the artwork for Pong Doubles. Yes, this one is the German advertisement flyer. This is our 15th ball and paddle video game and the 32nd video game that uses paddles as the input. It's the 37th video game that is discrete logic, DTL or TTL, and it's the 14th variant of Pong. Also, it's also official Pong. It's the second game after Pong, though the next recreation. So this video game could be the contender for the very first 4-player video game and the very first team video game where you can play a team play because it's allowing 4 people. So I'd like to have my money that this one was the first, that Atari beat the other game to the punch, or Tennis Tourney to the punch. But you never know for sure because the release dates are a little tight. This is Atari's newest video game. All the features of the original Pong, but it's 4-player. This is our 34th video game that we've seen from North America. And I keep emphasizing video game because at this point, there are lots of games you can see in the arcade, but a lot of them are electromechanical or video games that are like pinball. They don't have a video display to count as a video game. We've already seen one on the show when we played the laser clay shooting system. That one really wasn't a video game, but it was Nintendo, so I had to put it on here. Oh, look at that. They look so happy to be there. Playing some Pong Doubles. So this one is a big one. It's either this or Tennis Tourney that's in the ranking of the first 4-player video game and the first video game with team play. Looks like they're about to play real tennis. So just like we had before, there is not a rating for this one. We have to rate this one as 0 as we did before. All right, what else does 1973 have for us as we see every single video game in chronological order? Our next video game takes us to Japan. This is Astro Race, released at some time in September 1973. Astro Race. Here's the advertising flyer, or the back of the advertising flyer. The most exciting new video game featuring spaceships. Journey in the Cosmos. It actually calls it a video game. That's big. There's the standard model arcade cabinet you can see on the left side. Astro Race is the 39th video game we've seen on Chronologically Gaming and the 15th video game released in the arcade. It is the second video game by Taito after Elepong. And this is even a better advertising flyer. Not only does it look sci-fi, it looks almost like the sci-fi from the 50s or early 60s. Very, very classic. And they got the arcade cabinet on the side. But Taito ends up putting screenshots of the game. We don't really have a good screenshot of Astro Race on this one. Do they explain how to play? Yeah, you're just going to use the control lever. Pushing forward permits the ship to go up or down. Or I think you can only go up. Yeah. Oh, you can go up or down, pass through the meteorites, but don't let them hit you or you'll get knocked out. You flip it over the back. This one is all in Japanese. I think we had yeah, there we go. We have one that was translated in English. after it was ported to other places. So this is the 4th video game we've seen that was originating from Japan. And we're marking the video games in the region that they started from. So I'm sure this was ported and brought to other places, like the video games we've seen that started in North America. But we're just going to catalog when it first came out. And there we go. Look at that arcade cabinet. Astro Race is futuristic. This video game is surprisingly not Pong, after all the Pong variants we've seen. It is a variant of Space Race that Atari did, the second game by Atari. And it's possible that this one is the exact same PCB, or not PCB, the board. It's the same board as Space Race because it just looks so close. So I have an example of what the game looks like. The gameplay is over on the left side. It looks identical to Space Race. So this is the first variant of Space Race. And we're going to see video games that take this concept and incorporate it within other gameplay in the game. Right now, we're so early with the history of video games that the entire video game is a variant of Space Race. All right, so another video game we can't play ourselves, so we sadly have to give it a not rated system as we showcase more and more video games throughout the 1973. Let's see what our next game is. Coming up next is another game we've already seen on Chronologically Gaming. This is Gotcha, released at some time in October 1973. Maybe October 11th is some sources that I said in 1973. Let's check out Gotcha. This one is our 40th video game and the 16th video game we've seen in the arcade. It is the 4th video game by Atari and Alan Alcorn. Way to go, Alan. Pumping out tons and tons of classics. After Pong, Astro Race, and Pong Doubles. This is yet another video game, not Pong, which is very, very fresh and surprising right now. It is, if you look on the left side, it's very rare to see one of these games because it is essentially what we refer to now as an arcade maze game. This is the second time we've seen any game that's anywhere resembling that. The other one was Cat and Mouse that we saw on the Magnavox Odyssey, which is basically, it's just a maze moving around. This one is a very early version of a tag or chase game. The third time we've seen any video game that's trying that motif, you know, going to catch someone else. You can see the cross moves around the screen and you're trying to run away from someone that's tagging you. This idea for a video game is going to be expounded upon and it's going to get more complicated and eventually will morph into what we know as Pac-Man. But it's very early roots right here. So this one, I'm going to show you the artwork for this one. Gotcha is a little questionable. If you look at this arcade cabinet, this was one of the first arcade cabinets, and it is literally two pink bubbles on either side that look a lot like, I'll let you fill in the blanks. But underneath it is a digital joystick. It's kind of rare to see digital joysticks with all the paddle-controlled video games. This is the 5th video game that's using a digital joystick, and this one is sort of like that. The later version of the arcade cabinet is going to look like this, where they get rid of the questionable joysticks, you know, on the front, the chesticles, if you will, and they just show the joysticks like this. So this one is the 39th video game that is using discrete logic, DTL or TTL, and you can see on the arcade flyer, if you flip it over the back, it's calling it Amazing Maze of Fun. The walls of the maze displays in the video screen constantly change position, while the pursuer, a square, controlled by one player, chases the pursued, a plus sign, controlled by the second player. And you're just running around, navigating the maze and playing tag. That's basically what Gotcha is. There we go. We have an arcade board for Gotcha. Wow, look at all those chips. And there's another example for it. And there's the arcade marquee for Gotcha, with another later release for it. And I think this is, when I was in the arcade, this is the one that I've seen for Gotcha. It looked closer to this one. But actually, this looks like a fabrication. The picture doesn't match up with the arcade cabinet. But the red border on the arcade cabinet looks pretty familiar. There's the example of the screenshot, too. Yet another video game we're not really able to play ourselves, so we're going to have to give that one a no-star rating for everything up to this point. All right, so after that, what's our next video game? We're flying through the video games released at some time in 1973. This is Elimination, released sometime in October 1973. This is our 41st video game that we've seen on Chronologically Gaming, the 17th video game in the arcade, and this is, let me see the advertisement flyer, Elimination, the very first video game by Key Games. Alan Alcorn still did this one from Atari. It's his 5th video game that we've seen so far. Key Games was formed by Joe Keenan, who was a friend and neighbor of Nolan Bushnell, who's the co-founder of Atari. Sometime around September, I think, 1973. Well, in reality, Bushnell worked with Keenan to create this company. It's totally Atari, even though it says Key Games, because after all, the pinball and arcade distributors of the time were trying to demand exclusivity deals. He believed that Key Games could offer similar but renamed arcade games or clones of video games to distributors, and they would all think that Key Games was a competitor to Atari. So smart move, Nolan Bushnell. And so every time we see a video game that's by Key Games, it's really Atari in disguise. All right, so this is the 16th video game that we played. That's a ball and paddle style video game. Look at this, a fast-paced 2, 3, or 4-player video game. Sophisticated fun with lots of visual action, which tests the skill and luck of the players for replay after replay. And that's just breaking down. There's another arcade advertisement flyer. Elimination. Very exciting. And there's the example of the screenshot for Elimination. This one's pretty special. I'm going to show, there's a little bit of gameplay on the left side of the screen because this is going to be re-released later as Quadra-Pong. So right now, this is the first time you could see it by Key Games. This is the very first video game that's incorporating a last man standing mechanic, which means 4 people are playing. There's no team play. Everyone is on their own trying to survive and be the last person standing after so many lives. So this one is our 33rd video game that is using paddles for control. It is the 3rd video game in the Pong series. I know it's called Elimination now, but when it's Quadra-Pong, it'll still be part of the Pong series, after Pong and Pong doubles. This is the 14th video game that's a variation of Pong, and I'm going to call this one a variation of Pong as well as the series of Pong because it's slightly, it's the company of Key Games. We're changing up the formula just a little bit. And it's the 40th video game that's using discrete logic, which means no microprocessor, which means what you see that I've shown for Elimination is it. And we got to give it a no rating here on Chronologically Gaming. Don't worry, there'll be video games that we actually play, and we'll be rating those later. All right, after that, let's see what our next game is. More and more games in the arcade. This is Winner, released at some time in October 1973. Let's check out Winner. Here's the advertisement flyer. Oh man, this one is something we haven't seen yet. Our 42nd video game so far on the show, and the 18th video game released in the arcade. This is the very first video game by Midway. Video game. Midway is not shy to being in the arcade. So many pinball and electronic video games are out there. This is their very first game that has a television screen, hence video game. It is the 17th video game. That's a ball and paddle style game. And I'm meshing 2 different games together, Winner or Winner 2 and Winner 4. I'm just putting them all in the same thing because they're essentially the exact same game, just how many people can play at a time. All right, so watch this. This is the 2-player advertisement flyer. It's the television skill game. Wow, look at the people that are dressed for the arcade. I guess in the club for that one. Man, it is definitely the 70s. And notice that Midway refers to it as the television skill game because I guess they're brand new to the whole video game idea. So here's the example of the arcade cabinet for the 2-player version of Winner. This one is essentially Pong. It's just another one. It's the 15th variant of Pong we've seen so far. And there's the example of the 4-player version of it, Winner 4. This is the 5th video game that we've seen so far that allows 4-player gameplay at the same time. And it's also the 3rd video game we've seen that allows team play. You and your friend can pair up against 2 other people and play teams like Pong doubles and tennis tourney. This is another video game, the 5th one we've seen, that's been involved with legal disputes because you bet Atari sued them. Atari should be getting all the credit. They were the first ones. At least that's from what we've been told. This is also the 41st video game that uses discrete logic. Yet another video game not using a microprocessor, DTL or TTL. So here is another example. Man, that one looks even better. That one looks like it would fit inside of a nightclub. Awesome. And there's the arcade. That can't be the arcade board. It looks way too complicated. Or some of the chips may not be. I'll have to fact check that one. So zooming on the control panel, here is the control panel for Winner, the two-player version. You can see it's still using paddles to twist the knobs and move your paddle back and forth. There's the example of the arcade marquee. Midway, they're not pulling any punches. They already know how to advertise systems into bars and arcades, pinball and so forth. So there's the example of the advertising flyer for Winner 4, the 4-player version. I like the Winner 2 version better. Yeah, there we go. They look classier. So once again, another game we cannot play. We give it a no rating. And then we move on. Coming up next, as we breeze through all these video games from 1973, this is Hockey TV, released at some time in November 1973. We'll check out some of the artwork for Hockey TV. Oh, yes. Our 43rd video game that we've seen on Chronologically Gaming, and the 19th video game that we've seen for the arcade. This one is the second time we've seen a video game by Sega. Sega's second video game. Wow. The artwork's still very, very simple for at least the advertising flyer. If you can see the arcade cabinet on the left side, you know it's another Pong game. This is our 18th ball and paddle video game, and it is the 16th variant of Pong we've seen so far. It's also trying to do a theme with hockey. Obviously, it's all still ball and paddle, and it's all Pong, but we'll still say which video games are trying to be the sport, like actually advertise the sport. So this is the second time we've seen a video game that is advertising hockey as a sport. The other one we saw was on the Magnavox Odyssey. Even though I know it's just ball and paddle style play. But this one's a little interesting. Look at the top. It's allowing you to play two. This is essentially Pong with two sets of paddles. The game was repackaged with two other form factors shortly after this release. Table hockey in January 1974 and mini hockey in February 1974. But this is the very first Pong game where your one paddle is controlling two paddles on screen. Now, if we play, the 4-player games that we've seen with Pong, you could, take two hands and play with both the knobs and essentially play a control 2 at the same time. But this one, you have one knob that's controlling both paddles on the screen. So this is our 35th video game that's controlled with paddles, and the 42nd video game that's using discrete logic. Once again, there is no such thing as a microprocessor. And our 5th video game that we've seen so far from Japan. Imagine a world where Japan only has 5 video games. That's where we are sometime in November 1973. So there's the arcade cabinet, and you can see wood grain is where it's at. No plastic flashiness, just wood grain all the way here in the 70s. I love it. Way to go, Sega. It's also reminiscent of when we see some games later, they're going to be finding what is the trend and copying it. So Sega getting their start, Taito getting their start with video games, Midway getting their start because they're copying someone else. Whenever the big hit video game comes out, we're going to see lots and lots of clones. Pong right now is the one everyone's wanting to copy. All right, so I got to give this one a no rating for Hockey TV. All right, after that, let's see what our next game is. Our next game takes us still in Japan. This is Pong-Tron II, released at some time in November 1973. The sequel. If you wanted more Pong-Tron, here you go. This is the 44th video game we've seen so far on Chronologically Gaming, the 20th video game that we've seen in the arcade. Imagine a world where the arcade only has 20 video games. That's where we are right now. This is the 3rd video game we've seen from Sega so far, and it is once again another Pong-style video game. But this one has a few features that are a little different. It's still a ball and paddle game. It's the 19th ball and paddle video game we've seen so far. But this game features a changeover switch that allows the player to select between two types of games. A goal kick game for 1-player games and a ping pong 2-player game with the same contents as Pong-Tron. So it's essentially you have the first Pong-Tron in this cabinet and you can switch to Pong-Tron 2. The goal of the kick game has a goal in the middle on the left side where the player aims for the goal while avoiding the goalkeeper's board. The game ends when either player gets 11 or 15 points. And you flip it over the back, that's what they're explaining here. Look at the arcade control panel. It is just a knob going back and forth to be able to flip the game. You can see it's flipping from game 1 to game 2, and then you use the paddles for whatever game you want to play. So it has a single player experience for instead of playing against other people. Majority of video games we've seen so far, you have to have another human to play with you. So there's the arcade cabinet for Pong-Tron II. The 36th video game we've seen that you have to control with paddles. The 17th variant of Pong, and it's our 6th video game we've seen from Japan. Also, this is our 43rd video game that is using discrete logic. Still no microprocessors. Still got to rate it no rating. It's not 0. We'll call it, it's not rated because we didn't get to play it ourselves. All right, after that, let's see what our next game is. Coming up next, it's more Pong, what everyone's been wanting right now. It is Super Soccer, released at some time in November 1973. Our 45th video game that we've seen on Chronologically Gaming. Now, bear in mind, we're playing every single video game. In November 1973, 45 video games so far, and the only games we're not playing are games on mainframe and terminal. If there are games that are out that you could play, but for the masses, 45 video games is so little. Let's take a look at the artwork for Super Soccer. This is our 21st video game we've seen in the arcade, and the 3rd video game by Allied Leisure Industries. We've teamed up, and you'll own a champ. Whoa, wait a second. Look at the screen. You have one paddle, and it controls the forward, center, and defense. Like you're playing, I wouldn't say true soccer. I would say more like foosball. That's what this looks like. Moving 3 paddles at the same time. That's pretty cool. So this one is the 20th video game we've played that's a ball and paddle game. And this one is marketing or has the theme for soccer or European football. It's the 2nd video game we've seen that is, you could still call Pong soccer if you wanted to, but this one is marketed as sports, as a sports game for soccer. So the only other game that's a soccer video game right now would be on the Magnavox Odyssey. This is the 2nd only one. Instead of both players controlling a single paddle, each player controls 3 small paddles with the same control, representing the forward, center, and defender. The game lasts until the score limit is reached, and you can set that, I think, on the system. This is our 37th video game that you use paddles to control, and the 18th variant of Pong. It is the 44th video game that is using discrete logic, DTL or TTL, either one. And this is all I have. This is all the artwork I have. I don't even have footage of someone playing Super Soccer, but I can understand how it works because in the future, we're going to see these Pong-style games made where you can switch up game variations. This looks like some of the game variations I've seen, 3 paddles moving on the screen at the same time. So that's all we can really show for Super Soccer, but since we can't play it, we have to say no rating. All right, after that, let's see what our next game is. Coming up next, it's Leader. This is released at some time in the beginning of December 1973. Let's check out Leader, or Low Boy Leader. This is our 46th video game we've seen so far on the show, and the 22nd video game released in the arcade. This is Midway's 2nd or 3rd video game, depending on if you counted Winner 2 and Winner 4 as 2 different games. We're counting it as Midway's 2nd video game so far. It is, yet again, a ball and paddle video game, the 21st that we've seen so far. Leader is a 4-player Pong variant with a knockout system. Each player has to defend a goal on one side of the screen. If the ball enters their goal, they lose a life. When all lives are lost, they're out of the game. A cross-shaped midsection adds extra unpredictability. And I don't think it declares it here on the front of the advertisement flyer. This is a 2- or 4-player game where players are eliminated until one player is declared the winner. Yeah, it calls it a center maze, but it's just a cross that you have in there. It's really not a maze. Gotcha had the real maze. And there's another advertisement flyer. Ooh, a TV knockout. This one is just boasted as Leader, and I think, is that too? Yeah, there's the cocktail cabinet, which first time we've seen a cocktail cabinet here on Chronologically Gaming, even though some of these systems had a version that was cocktail, and there's the upright version for Leader. Midway is trying to push their way into video games. Yeah, okay, so Low Boy Leader is the cocktail version, and Leader is the upright arcade cabinet. Sweet. Exciting 2- or 4-player TV game. They have to make sure they say that. This game can be played with 4 players. It's the 6th video game that we've seen that allows 4-player control, or 4 players multiplayer. This one is yet another Last Man Standing video game. It's only the 2nd that we've seen after Atari's Elimination, and which will eventually be Quadra Pong. There's the example of the arcade cabinet. a 38th video game we've seen that incorporates paddles, and the 19th variant of Pong so far. The 45th video game we've seen that uses discrete logic, which means we can't play it. I'm sure we're going to see plenty of games like this later. This is the thing. Pong is the thing right now. So we'll have to say no rating on that one and press forward to see our next game. All right, our very next game is, again, released in sometime in the beginning of December 1973. This is Wimbledon. Let's check out Wimbledon, taking a look at the advertisement. Wimbledon, very, very classy. Still got the wood grain for the arcade cabinet, but I like how there's no really system for what arcade cabinets are supposed to look like, so everyone's doing their own thing. Wimbledon is the 47th video game we've seen playing every single video game in order. It is the 23rd game released for the arcade, and this one is the second video game by Nutting Associates. This one was done specifically by Miel Domus. The only other game Nutting's done so far has been Computer Space. So that was 1971. What have they been doing for 2 years? Well, remember, at this time, not everything coming out in the arcade was a video game. Most likely, other companies are putting things out there. Pinball, electromechanical, or something that is not incorporating a video system like this. This is a very special one. If you look at the back of the advertisement flyer, it says it has a living color TV. Giant color screen instantly attracts players. Color television? Are you kidding me? Not only is it color television, this video game is programmed in color. This is the very first video game that is in color. Take a look at that picture on the advertisement flyer. That's showing the game in action. That doesn't look like something from 1970. That looks like something from the future, like we're going to see later on the TRS-80 color computer way later. This is the 22nd video game we've seen that's a ball and paddle style game. And this one, since it's called Wimbledon, it's advertised as a tennis game. This is the third tennis game we've seen so far, or a sports tennis game so far on Chronologically Gaming. Take a look at the, at least this arcade cabinet. So this arcade cabinet and the other one have a different control scheme that we've seen. Most of the time it's been paddles, and there is a version of Wimbledon that does use paddles, but this is the very first, or one of the very first, that's using sliders to control the paddles on screen. It's not using the little knobs that you twist. But it is a 4-player video game. 4 players simultaneous. This is the 7th video game we've seen so far that allows 4 people to play. And it's also the 4th video game that gives you team play, because you're meant to be like you're playing tennis. I don't know for sure if Atari sued them on this one. I couldn't find any sources that this one had a legal dispute involved with it, but it wouldn't surprise me if someone said, "Oh yeah, Atari sued Midway," but Midway's pretty big. I don't know if they went that route with this game, but this is pretty nice seeing the color display. This is the 20th variant we've seen of Pong up to this point, and the 46th video game we've seen that is using, again, discrete logic, TTL. Transistor to transistor logic. It's a really expensive game too. 25 cents or 50 cents to play this one too. They were racking up the dough. No wonder. I mean, 1973, 25 and 50 cents. That is a lot. So cool. All right, so there's Wimbledon. I'm going to have to say we aren't able to rate this one, even though I really want to play the very first video game that was in color. Up to this point, the video games that appeared to be in color had an overlay over the screen. They were using some color or plexiglass that was colored to make it appear like the game was in color, but this one is true. This one is really color. All right. And that's where we got to put our video game playing on pause. We don't have any more quarters. We're blowing our life savings playing all these video games from the 70s. But we're going to continue and press forward and play every single video game in order and make sure that no game is left behind here in the backlog. Next time on the backlog of Chronologically Gaming, we have even more variations of Pong as we continue through the video games released at some time in 1973. We don't have the actual release date for these games. That's it for today, and like I always say, Pong is video game. Hey everybody, thanks for checking out the channel and joining me on my quest to play every single video game in order of release. We'll be streaming live every weekday at 9 p.m. Central, so join us and let us know if we missed any games along the way. This video would not be possible without Launchbox, RetroArch, and MAME. Tell all your friends there's some crazy guy named Chronologically Gaming trying to play every single video game. We have links down below that'll send you to places like our Discord and Patreon, and one that says all the video games we've ever played. If you go there, it's a list of everything, and you can click right to the game you want to see. Chronologically Gaming is the name to look for. We are Perpetually Retro, and we will catch you next time.